We're live.
So Senate Education Committee, March 19th. We're looking for 2:00 and we have set today aside just to have some commitments about where we're going. Either working on the sort of beginnings of a worksheet or whatever that we handed out, we talked about yesterday. And so I'll just start by saying it seems logical that it starts with thinking about what are our goals for this legislation. And I put in, if you don't mind, just to get things started, to get the people's brains engaged on it. And so if people have anything else they want to talk about, or if you want to start this working, but it seems to me that the first thing in the way we need to do is just figure out what our goals are, what we're trying to achieve there. I agree. So.
Quality education and lower taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's write them down.
And in Lauren,
I had kind of in the
Lauren,
sustainable kind of goes a little bit with. So we'll do that in the end. We'll figure out how to put these together. So it's So
well, with Lauren taxes, it's making education cost effective. I'm not going to say affordable, but cost effective. Because if we do that, then it's going to be taxes.
Education quality standards.
What does that mean?
That's one of the goals.
To maintain the standards.
What'd you say?
Maintain education quality standards.
Yeah, I was just gonna go a bit more, be a bit more specific here. I think another thing I want to look at is trying to just make it easier for teachers to teach and staff to do the things that they need to do. I think that the legislature, as well intentioned as it is, has a tendency to probably for almost every profession do things that, while they're well intentioned, create a lot of either burdensome work or duplicative work. And so figuring out what we can do to just provide more to provide teachers with more bandwidth to do their job, I think would be good.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, that's interesting you say that, because I had thought about the same thing a little bit differently. I thought about it as let principals run the schools.
Yeah.
Which is closely related. So maybe
So something like refine duties of educators and administrators.
Or maybe even rather than refining duties, making it more kind of just giving them more free reign. Obviously there's essential things that we have to make sure are being followed, like discrimination rules. Obviously we're going to make sure everybody's following that, but I think giving more free reign to the professionals to the professionals who've been educated on how to educate, letting them do their thing, I think.
it's generic.
Yeah.
I get some concept.
What goals do you have? Or do you have specifics you want to have?
No, I don't. Certainly your comment about lowering taxes, so the economically sustainable, I think. It's all the same issue. We need to reflect on taxpayers' ability to absorb current or increased education costs. So economically sustainable and lower taxes. It's kind of same issue. Right.
Good. We still going? Yeah. I'll say a couple of things to go back to Shane's comments. There has been talk about a uniform statewide curriculum. That conflicts with what you said. And I'm actually, for what's worth, or European. Having model curriculum is one thing. But then letting teachers give teachers we get the goals and roles, but it's sort of what I think you're saying, like that's how I and to think about it. So
I think, what I've heard or read from what I've heard is that we're kind of going to standardize pay too. As much as we can across the state to bring lower wage, teachers up to where the upper ones are.
yeah, that's been one of the pitches that the second church has made, right? Is that if we have a more efficient system, we'll be able to pay. Right.
Do you foresee like it's a cost of living in Chittenden County, so the cost of living in Northeast? Think of it. Do you see it's like
A BH or yes.
yeah, but what's there's a term, cost of living, cost of living index. I mean, is it just? It's like waiting for the students. I mean, the ADM is based on poverty level of the region. I think we're kind of going to get away from that, except that, we need to figure out the right class size for teachers so that the pay is commensurate with the number of teachers, the students they have to teach. But that's all going to be part of the equation. If your comment was specifically regarding teacher pay, right? Equalize teacher pay. So how equal do you make equal?
That's where I think, don't mind me interrupting, but that how the military scales it, that they have the scale that you come in, you know what you're getting paid for you can look, check it out. But if I live in Burlington, I'll get it's cost of living's higher, so I'll get an additional a base pay, and then you take, just like the military does, BAH throughout the region, but teacher doesn't matter. Oh, I'm gonna move from, down in Brattleboro up to Burlington. My pay doesn't change at all, but my BAH does, because I'm moving into Burlington and it's twice as much.
It's not just the military either. It's federal civil service. Each position has a grade. And I think that maybe by standardizing that, we could probably get something. I'm sure state civil services.
We also have to, probably not going to be the ones to
Right.
We're going to be maybe saying thoughts, but
Yeah.
right, this is going to
I'll go to, find out.
I think also, I think that's a great idea, but I think the issue that we would run into is just the amount of revenue that's available in a place like Windham County compared to Chittenden County. If you're trying to pay teachers the same, that could be a challenge, but you're also talking about the cost of living or the BAH analogy. And so I think that's something that would get leveled out when you're talking about just the tax pool that you can draw from. But yeah, that's a finance.
In the case of teachers, the bargaining unit, you got the union will have something to say about that too. So there's going to be some legal wrangling over that.
But I feel for us, just what you corrected out, Chair, is that this is our first priority to get where everybody's semi-comfortable with it. And then this defining just what you had said, because before we do this, everything's still, as I see it, up in the air. And then
So that raises the, what, I think might be one of our early questions is we've had, let's say a lot, but some testimony about the optimal district sizes. And I think it would be fair to say that we've heard from the views that it should be a minimum of 4,000 per testimony, and saying that the optimal size is somewhere between 12 and 15,000. I think as we think about in the end this map and takes a testimony, we should probably have a sense as a committee of what we think is the right district or SU. I mean, what size. It's what people giving thought to that.
I'm 6 to 12.
I think that it's very hard to figure out what the right district number or size is when you don't know what formula we're using, because I mean, there's an endless number of hypothetical formulas that could exist that would all have a different impact depending on the union or district size. And so I feel like it's hard to figure out, how many towns should be in one district when we don't know how much that population we may be putting into the tax pool if we don't know the formula. And so I feel like it would be great if we, had a few formulas that we could use and then just, mix around the map and see what happens in terms of those different formulas as they're played out in hypothetical scenarios to get to whatever goal we're looking at.
I will confess that as I've been thinking about this, I've been thinking about it as if we are going to do a proof of the nation formula with a
And I think,
with a weighted for people block and effectively. Stick it up.
just go around and see what
Let's
happens.
certainly know that but we think about that, we're thinking about it that way in three over.
If we can get an analysis of what that formula looks like, yeah, I feel like there's got to be some way to make a program that you put in the formula, you play around with the map. I mean, like the GIS program we were looking at yesterday. There's some way to, what would the revenue be if you take out 2 towns here, add a couple towns there, and how would it shake out when it gets to the budget? There's some way we could figure that out. That would be a concept.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a who goes first here.
Yeah.
And I think the finance committee is kind of waiting for us to tell them what we think that. And we did hear testimony to the fact that I think purely on that basis, the larger districts with the foundation formula better work, but I think that we have to think about how that concept actually meets the ground if you want. But yeah, let's just hold it here. Yeah.
Just one of the concerns I've got, and we're seeing it now in like law enforcement agencies, town highway crews, town needs a worker, town B has got one, they offer them $2 more an hour. So by stabilizing, coming up with a stable wage system for all teachers, then it'll kind of, I call it poaching. We want to try and encourage the teachers to stay in the good schools and that.
They can help them to stay. So
everybody comes in at the same wage level, right out of college, come in as an educator. They're gonna start at this, and, not saying we have to have steps, but
Yeah, so. Okay, yes. So, we. Just thinking about the districts. I kind of got I'll use the term convinced, not put a semi in front of it, because I'm still, everything's still, but that. I don't know when I say the term larger, I'm not sure what I mean, but I'll say that in my mind, we're probably talking something between 6 and 8. That's what I kind of think, maybe a little higher, whatever. But you do gain the ability to have the two things that I heard from this secretary one day that I found particularly convincing was the ability to build a deeper bench. Because right now, in some of the smaller units, one person leaves, they've got nobody. And so being able to be big enough to have a bench, I found that compelling. And then I found compelling the notion of being able to offer more specialized services. If it's obviously if you're too small, you just can't do it. So, and I don't know what those, anyway, that sort of led me to, and this is just, one of six, led me to thinking that probably districts of somewhere between 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in the right range. And they're probably going to be very different. So they can be different sizes. State. I don't know. So that's just my 2 cents. And I get you. I get what you're thinking. And I'm thinking.
So I kind of like the foundation fund. Let's see what the board, that's my opinion, that we should see what the board, or if like, you'd be like, I don't like foundation funding. So we all know where we're at. That if foundation funding is the way we should be going, then we know we're all on the same page. But if we have two or three that are like, there could be something better out there, then we should investigate it. But if we decide, hey, foundation funding now, what do we need per pupil, per district to make it effective? Doesn't matter if you're on the west side of the state where it's thinner populated, as long as they have that many people in that district, they're going to raise X amount of dollars because we're doing foundation funding. Then it's obviously schools that they're going to have to be run too, but we know our dollar amounts are going to be effective for each district. So I'm in agreement with foundation fund.
me too. And we heard the other night that, 13,200 per student. I think it's been accepted that that's a good start point. And but then they went into the discussion about budgets. Is that everybody's going to get that for every student? And then, how do we build our budget at the local level, the district level? And I didn't know how to answer that.
Well, I think the 13.2 is in the end is more because of the weights of activity added.
So the question was who pays, right? And the concept that some of the attendees at this particular meeting, they were of the opinion, well, it's just going to cause our budget, our local education budget to rise. We tried to shape that conversation a little bit, but we made no headway. There's some people who are very involved in the process.
And they're worried about the budget not passing because our cost per pupil is 11,400. And now you're saying it's going to be 13,200. We're never going to pass.
Well, the thing is, now this foundation formula, you don't have the best budget, right?
That's
what we tried to.
we kind of alluded to that. We didn't really come out and say that.
Yeah.
I wanted to because I understood that.
So let's frame that a little bit because it might be helpful because because they're watching, same folks are watching, right? So,
Yes.
the budget would be presented and approved at the school board level, at the district level, at the, somewhere between the 4,000 and the 12,000 level, right? Student level. It's not, no longer would be, in this case, would be local advisory committee. They're not, involved in the budgeting process except to, provide recommendations on equipment or program or that kind of thing.
Well, and I think there wouldn't even be, if you would simply get it from the state, you wouldn't be raising the money by district, you'd be raising the money on a statewide basis, and everybody would get the same.
Right.
amount of money
That's where the 13
Per,
came from.
per weighted people.
Right.
So, yes,
So just pulling this idea out of the ether is just a thought, something, we're gonna think out of the box here. Local control is something that's already come up and it's going to come up more fiercely, I think. The local advisory boards don't, aside from providing suggestions, don't really seem to have any teeth. Is there a realm in which every local advisory board comes together and they vote? Each board gets a vote with the main school board for the entire district. Almost like Congress, like each advisory committee is its own representative. They go cast their vote with the supervisory union school board for the entire district, and then whatever all those votes come out to is what applies to the entire district. Or is that?
Yeah, that's a question.
so you're talking some kind of a hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to take you off track, but when you're done with Senator Machines question, I'd like to go back to the 13.2 question.
So, and I guess where I'm questioning that is the foundation formula where we come up with an education tax rate for the state. And that's where the 13.2 comes out.
So if you're the lowest spending district in the state, right, but now your per student cost statewide and district-wide,
You got $2 grand more.
where's it come from?
Comes from the state.
Yeah, it's locked in, but who's paying for it?
Well, everybody is.
Yeah, but at what rate? So if you're a voter from the town we were in, and your budget before was 11,000 per student, and now it's 13.2, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, why does it not make everybody's taxes go up statewide?
Or some go down, some go up?
Yeah, I understand the administration's concept here, I think, which is that it won't cost more to do the foundation formula of the water man because the system will be more efficient. Getting there is how we do that. So that's the
Right, but already it's $2,000 above where they're spent their budgets already.
yeah, but we have the perverse. The system now has become perverse, and it's kind of in many instances doing the opposite of what it's intended to do, because you have some of the poorest districts voting no on their budgets because it's taxes are high, and yet if they voted more in their budget, it actually wouldn't cost them more money because of the way the system works. And and I guess the point is maybe that those schools really need it. Some of them that have been in the forest districts and push,
Plus wages. I mean, you gotta look at, they're complaining, a lot of towns are just saying, no. I don't make that kind of money. It's gonna make my property taxes go up. I can't afford it anymore. Part of the problem is property valuation across the state is inconsistent. And until every town reappraises, and we had a gal from property valuation in today talking about what the state plans to do to get everybody reappraised statewide. And how to maintain that, to get everybody on an even playing field. And, I don't know, I think it's relevant.
oh, it's all
And it also has to do with the weight. I mean, if the average wage in my district is $20 an hour. And Chittenden County is 40. There's a disparity right there.
So. So we have, so you do want to get to the finance discussion. Probably all have our own thoughts about that. Do you want to go there now, or do you want to keep working down this? So in the end, I do have in mind that I've had a discussion with Senator Cummings that, for us to maybe put together a memo about our thinking about finance. Of course, they're actually going to do it. Put a memo about what we're thinking. Present to them, but I don't know if it makes our and I understand Senator Hashim's. I don't know how to answer the question about how we. I've been thinking about optimum district size kind of by the efficiencies and the benefits that it brings to the student experience by being able to have. And I do think that if we are talking about per weighted pupil block grant, maybe it becomes a little bit less of an issue as long as it's high enough. So if we go backward for the sport club, I think two of us have kind of said that we think we might be in the, and by the way, we don't have, this is not this positive discussion. We're not going to, but maybe somewhere in the 4,000 to 10,000, if we put our two together range, saying that, okay, you will be semi-comfortable with that notion.
I'm at the like 4 to 15.
So you got a big range. You're still thinking about it. I mean, try to understand.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I guess I have a big range because it still feels like we're at the very beginning phase, so I'm not gonna lock myself into anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know obviously we can change our views, but I think it's just too early to, at least in my mind.
How do we get past that? And I don't mean you. I don't mean you.
Yeah.
How do we get?
So your recommendation the other day about bringing senators
Yeah.
in to talk about their specific regions, because we operate in an environment of it's a political environment, so we're used to counties and districts and that kind of thing. But there's geography, there's population, there's population density. There's the historical norms of who's aligned with who. Obviously, the size considerations. I would start the conversation just to kind of, we're not 5 of us plus 1. We're not necessarily thinking about all the right issues. Right.
To that point, I think it would definitely be helpful to know where senators stand on these different district sizes. And while I would like to hear from superintendents and folks from across the state about potential nuances and issues, is ultimately up to each individual senator to have an idea as to what their district needs or wants. And it would, I mean, if in a dream scenario, every senator came in and said, our district absolutely loves this map and it's helpful. If we heard that from every single senator, I would be very happy to move forward with whatever we come up with.
Well, let's, because we have, well, it's at least a starting point to get some of our fellow senators in here and say to them the same things as well, dotted lines at this point. Just this, I mean, we could ask ourselves that as senators as well, because it's so and as you say, down at the board, when we get to more granular level of having, superintendents in as well. I was giving an example to somebody about where I live. If you looked at a map, my guess is none of you would know how closely Manchester and Weston are aligned, even though they're quite a distance apart. Same, and you can tell me one of those, and you can tell me for those, and you can, in your district. So if you just looked at maps, you can. So anyway, I think that's a great idea, and I will work on getting some people in there maybe on Friday. You get to start the discussion.
And
All right, I got a question for my own, information is. We're gonna, some of the stuff we're gonna force feed to everybody. These, are we gonna tell them this is the way it's gonna be, or are we gonna do that to ourselves as we develop this plan? Because, the normal tendency is when you tell them they gotta do it, there's a normal pushback. So do we know the things that are in the plan that are not, that there's no option? I mean, it's not optional. That we have identified all the.
We don't know. We're the ones doing it. So.
So I think that'd be a good place to start is, what is solid that we can't bend on. And then everything else is fair game.
and right now, I think it's all very fluid.
Yeah. So,
I guess one thing our senators, but the SUs, they have a association. And it's to put out to them, say, this is what we're thinking. We're gonna somewhere between 9 and 15 districts, what the max we want. Why don't you give us a quick proposal, since you seem to be, they are more in the know of how they are all linked together.
well, maybe we have, let's start with senators. Get a sense of, just make general sense to you, and then we go down to the next level with some superintendents, and look at different adjustments. And I had one senator, I won't say who, but show me with her finger exactly where she thought the district ought to be divided, and the larger one ought to be divided into two. And that's what we'll get it on Friday.
That was part of our discussion Monday night was, we get hundreds of emails. There's 600,000 opinions. If you're this group of people right here had one person that knew education and knew the needs of the district, that could collect the information that they think we need to see in each district, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
That way, if you let people have a say, sometimes you gotta make them think it's their idea to. And I don't mean that in a mean way.
Set that on the screen.
Sometimes people need to know that they have skin in the game, but they're also we're listening to what they're
Yeah,
more.
and we want to listen.
Yes.
So,
And I think that's very important, and sometimes they don't, that's what they really didn't like with, the governor's plan, that they thought that was it, and that's how it was gonna be, and it's like, well, once you're here, you learn that is not the truth. The truth is, this committee and other committees will decide.
let's keep moving down a little bit, because to get to some of that in a second here. So, like I said yesterday, on board size, you raised the issues that are of local control, and that's gonna come in. So, what I was thinking about that, and that's when I, at least, start the discussion, thought it would be better to have 9. No, it doesn't resolve it. It's not every issue. Seemed to me that 5 was very few for the district, some of the districts this size, and going to 9 would give people somebody they know and a contact on the board. So, what do we think about board size? I think about the 6 districts, the big ones.
Big geographic area, bigger than they're used to. It doesn't necessarily overlap political boundaries, so that changes the dynamic dramatically. Creates very large political blocks that are quite powerful. it's okay, but it just changes the dynamic. 5 seems really low to ensure that there's, let's just say hypothetically, that it's like a combination of Rutland and Bennington counties, as an example. Five reps on a board is pretty small.
Yeah.
And it appears to be artificially small. Well, I'm not an organizationalist where I study like what's the optimal group size, but again, somewhere between, I'd say like, maybe 8 and 15, just to make, but it's really about how do you properly represent the region.
I mean, I think one piece of that, well, do we have any idea how many wards there would be? Or would that be, would we convert school boards? Ward?
That would be the number. If we said 9, we'd have 9 wards. Said 11, we'd have 11 wards.
Do we have a rough estimate of how many wards there might be? If we don't make no changes to current school boards in the districts, do we have any idea of how many wards would be created in each of these districts?
But school boards wouldn't make sense because you'd have, this has one district board. So
Right.
it'd be,
So, I mean, so if, what I meant is, if the school board for a school or a group of schools turns into a ward for that for that area, do we have an estimate of how many wards there would be? And I assume we could, expand it a bit so that, you don't have a ward for just one town, perhaps. But
yeah,
what I'm getting at is, if the school board for the entire school union is required to be representative of each ward, ideally, I mean, how many people would end up being on that SU school board?
well, the SU or the district, because we're doing 2 constructs here.
Right. A SU, in terms of, each colored block is what I'm referring to. Because, so for each of these blocks of color, the SU or the SD, there's going to be one central school board, right?
Yeah.
So is it in the realm of possibility to require that school board to be representative of every ward, like to have a member from each ward
Yeah.
on that board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to have a board with 30 people on it if there's, but because that's a huge board.
So at least in my mind, the number of wards correspond to the number of board members.
Yeah, isn't it?
Have 1 board member.
Unless you have at large, it's kind of the construct.
Yeah.
Is my simple understanding. That a ward equals a seat on the board. The thing that's good for, I don't know what it was, 6 out of the whatever, or 8 out of it. The ones which are the wards constructed because they're about tuitioning schools, non-tuitioning schools, it's a little more complicated. And I think that equalizing the populations amongst those would probably be our biggest challenge, as opposed to a county or a supervisory union that's all, purely operating.
Yeah, so we should probably, maybe for the sake of thinking this through, we should probably start with the 6 large districts and then figure out this SU for the other 3 level afterwards. Because it's, you have to think about, they're a little bit different. So, but if you thinking first about the large districts, the 6, like you said, what did you say, between 8 and 15 members? Feels right. We're talking about, how to make people feel like they're represented. In fact, how to be represented, not to make them feel like they are. Have people feel like they have access to their rep word and what's the right number. We haven't taken a lot of testimony about this, but we do all know that like the board of 30 is like hopeless. It's way too big. And Senator Weeks suggested that we should be thinking the range of 8 to 15. And So we're just trying to figure out what we think is the, you know, for the 6 well, fully operational districts, we think is the right number.
Sorry, I was late. I was in GovOps. I don't know if Will mentioned that. I emailed.
I forwarded it.
Oh, great. Okay. So I was in GovOps with this small amendment that I apparently asked for on the floor. I think it's a good question to hold lightly enough to share thinking with GovOps. Because I think there's going to be really different size populations involved. And I don't know if it makes sense to just have a number range as much of a flexibility per the size and makeup. We have much more geographically isolated districts. So I just worry that if we say 8 to 15, that's totally fine with me, that we're just really open to changing that.
Oh, I think everything we're talking about now is subject to.
Yeah.
Just pick a spot.
We have to get started spot. We kind of
Place
find a
to start.
land on
Yeah.
place where we can begin to.
I just think it like words like proportional and, you know, thoughtful of, because, you know, we, in a GovOps context, you think about what's too big for someone to feel comfortable running in that size of a ward. Who are the at-large members? Do you have at-large student members? I personally would advocate for there to be 2 students for each board, and build that in from the start, because I think that's just always been a passion of mine. And they're 15 now, and I think instead of removing students from them, it would be, I think, wise and fair to include students at the start.
Right, let's write student reps down with a question mark and giant.
As a caveat of voting, non-voting.
They,
Not that I have an opinion.
yeah.
It's a question.
It's it's essentially a constitutional question where they have the same rules and regulations that most of what they do is a non-binding vote because they're not 18. If they're not 18.
So it's looking for
Okay. Okay, well, this is interesting because what's, you know, kind of a couple of you are suggesting, I think maybe is that we say we're in this, maybe in this range of 8 to 15, whatever, but then we'll think about it as we actually figure out how our districts end up in the size. Okay, is that?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect summary. I would add on to that we need to consider in the list of questions, wards versus and or at large. And I think that we also need in this governance structure that we need to consider what election cycle.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's down there. And
Okay, I'm thinking,
the,
just another thought, maybe of a hybrid idea regarding local control. Kind of similar to town meeting, how, you know, the town, every citizen goes there, they can vote yay or nay on the budget. But, you know, you have the select board making policy decisions at their select board meeting. Is it in the realm of possibility to have a situation where that central school board is making policy decisions like hiring, allocating services, but when it comes time to vote on the budget, each ward gets to cast a vote up or down on the budget. So it still provides some local control, but also centralizes some of the
that's an interesting
policy making.
The interesting thing is that goes back then to the way we fund this is there may not be a vote on the budget. Because the money would be coming at a certain rate that it would come if we end up with the ability to add to that. And that, but your notion of that's an interesting thought. Yes.
I think, it's just like last session, we were talking about BOCES. Well, BOCES has a totally different connotation depending where you are. If you're in New York State, it's a whole different system. I advocate for, let's change the name of BOCES. Let's call it something else. Same thing with SUs. If we're only gonna have one supervisory union, let's call it something else rather than, that way we don't have the superintendents. I think a lot of it has to do with the mindset that, the system we have now is gonna be forever changed. And that maybe we have terminology nailed down to, we're gonna call it something different, just to get away from that mindset. That we're gonna change.
I know she's not showing it, well, but that was, I have a feeling sitting there thinking they'll rewrite every time.
Right.
That's a lot of the writing of statute. If we,
I'm gonna commit some kind of heresy. But I think the superintendents gave us a gift with the proposal that they put out, I think yesterday or the day before. It is their answer to all of these questions. And I'm not saying we just write that into a statute, but that we ask ourselves, why not? Who are we maybe to take a different approach than probably the people who we've charged as the greatest experts on these questions, who have the deepest expertise? Do we need other opinions on what they have proposed? Because I think on this subject, one of the major recommendations is set parameters and then let a group work for the next 6 months on the orders. I don't know how I will get comfortable in my region of the state on this committee drawing the borders for people, especially given the current capacity we have to draw maps. So unless the process changes about how we get agreement on maps with the House, I just cannot see how this is going to happen where we draw maps.
you mean district boundaries?
Yes. That we say, okay, between 4,000 and 8,000, try to keep existing parameters, around travel sheds and CTE centers. And you have 6 months to do this and present it to the House and the Senate with lots of input from others. That is what I think I saw in their proposal.
Where did send?
We haven't seen it.
I
haven't seen it.
They presented it in the House
Yeah,
yesterday.
well, we can have them in.
Yeah,
Um,
I can forward it, or I can Will can forward it.
Yeah.
I just think it's a good place to start. I don't know. I worry that we're like inventing way too many.
we actually, before you came in, we were talking about beginning to get senators in to look at the district system for during 11. This might make sense or not. And then working down through superintendents. I've got my own thoughts about what you're saying.
Mhm.
Chittenden
County's really big.
Yeah.
The whole area up there is I will say, I don't know which senator I could bring in from my area who would feel comfortable.
come into groups. Well, yeah.
Well, the one thing that I see is that, yes, our superintendents are some of the best people that can say, yes, this will work, this won't work. But what I've heard from them as well with other issues, it's like, just send us something so we know what we're going to have to work with and we'll make it work.
Well,
So,
and they weren't saying, oh, let us draw the lines. They're saying, get the right group together. And I think that's what I've been saying the whole time is I is it going to take all session for us to get senators in and draw maps? Because once you start down that road,
That's
who
why
is drawing our maps? Like, I
right
just,
now, you have a senator that took a lot of time, took a lot of effort and decided where the lines are. So then it's like, hey, I know I don't think this is perfect. But at some point, we just gotta say, this is what we're gonna go with and this is how we're gonna build it. Because we will be no different than our predecessors if we don't make that type of decision.
I think you're just frankly underestimating how difficult redistricting is.
No, after listening to that, I'm well aware. And
But the actual physical process in the legislature.
Let's not conflate wards with the district boundaries. Let's leave wards aside for a moment, because that is a different discussion. Leave the wards aside. I think we're now just thinking about the district.
I mean, okay, so we have county-based senators, and that takes us all session to decide is Huntington going here or here. I mean, if once you change a single town on the map, it changes the student count, it changes all of your calculations. You have to treat this like redistricting. You have to know where your boundaries are starting and who's drawing the map every time you change it.
The great thing is about this, it doesn't matter if a town goes in and out. It's not the same thing that reverberates, because for the district boundaries, the population within the districts, it doesn't matter. It's only when you start to get to the wards. And so the drawing the district boundaries is not as complicated as drawing Senate boundaries.
It may not be, but we have to agree with the House. That we don't have to do that in the redistricting process. The House and the Senate have to agree on this map.
Yeah, yes, we have to set district boundaries. My own view is it's our job. And that
It's our job at Senate Education.
and it's going to take a lot of testimony, a lot of people coming in, a lot of testing. Whether it's, and then senator superintendents, others in, and just do testing of what we're thinking.
I guess to do that right, it's gonna take all of the rest of our time.
Think
So you think that district boundaries is like our job, that's our job, Senate Education.
It's
It still has to go. over
probably, yeah,
at some point.
probably the most important thing we have to do. Because everything kind of flows from it.
I struggle with that because I think there's so many ways we could get it wrong. Just sitting in here, like, I don't think the process is set up for us to do this well, for us to just bring people in and say, help us get this map right. I'm not hearing enough information about how we're gonna do this in a methodical, scientific way.
That's what we're trying to work through how we do that. I do think it's, we start with senators and then superintendents and because it is on one level less complicated because moving it down, for instance, from one district to another actually has no impact on the difficulty of the job. Because you don't have to worry about the ripple effect. You have to worry about having to get to wards, but for the districts themselves, you don't have to worry about that.
It's gonna, I don't know if I'm just dumb here, but I mean, if moving a town from one district to another, or once union to another, if it has no impact, why do we have districts to begin with?
But it has no impact on voting and proportionality because if this district has 4,000, this district has 8,000, it doesn't make any difference. And if this one goes to 4,200, this one goes to whatever I said, minus 200, because you moved to a small town, it doesn't matter beyond the confines of those because you don't have to worry about proportionality until you get to drawn wards.
So I guess in one or two sentences, how, like, what role do these districts play? And how do we define that?
They play the role, number one, they are the SUs kind of by definition because they're providing the special ed services. They're the ones setting them. They're the ones allocating the money that comes And all they're running like any board. There's the board, like any school board, except they have a larger district.
Consolidation of administration, school administration. That's
And then
the primary goal.
those other advantages that we were talking about earlier about specialized services and being able to have scale to develop a deeper bench and those kinds of things.
So I mean, I think the question on the table is, do we believe we have the time, resources, capacity, and knowledge to make the districts ourselves in the next month? I don't know what your time frame is in the next month. Or do we set up a process that we think could be trusted to hear critical considerations and voices that comes back to us?
I mean, we had the discussion the other day about the fact that we always have the reapportionment commission and they go through all the work and 10 minutes later it's irrelevant. Because the legislature does the job.
But we set up a specific process for that.
Yeah, I feel like that's what the Commission on the Future of Education is tasked with to some extent,
The map drawing,
or at least giving us a starting point. A process.
Anyway, yes.
So I think that, I'll make an assumption that a lot of the school districts have already decided if there's gonna be a merger or, a lot of that stuff has already been decided at the local level. Well,
I don't think so. If they had,
right.
uh,
I mean, they've been mentally preparing themselves for the work.
so I think there's very distinct camps out there that consider that as a viable concept, and those that don't.
I know my school district, all three towns in it voted, because an article on everybody's budget or everybody's article on that, will we close one school? And the people said yes. So they've already been mentally preparing and I think the school board process has been working. They haven't decided which school yet, but they've already decided the best way to make the process work.
And
They just need to be told it's gonna happen.
and they gave the option with money to fund it, and
Yes.
just one became an SU, combined SUs that I recall,
Well, that's
one or two.
part of the plan.
Well, that if you give them the option, it's not gonna happen,
Right.
because just what's happening here in the
Sure,
committee.
yeah,
It's
people can walk away
too
from the table.
big.
It's and it
too
rips
big.
communities apart. We did
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah.
So I'm understanding that there are pros and cons to a lot of different paths here. I'm asking the committee I think we only heard from Tom Little and the Secretary of State. Yay, but they don't walk us through the process of making maps every day. You should have someone from Ledge Council who's tasked with redistricting come in, because what I see being needed is
We have that tomorrow.
okay, great. What I think is needed is something similar where we have different committees represented from the House and the Senate that are geographically representative, and they work separately from our committees for the rest of session on the appropriate maps. I don't feel comfortable making the maps
So-
just as Senate.
So if they brought you in a map like this and said, this is what our best recommendation is, you're gonna go, okay, you did good research, and I'm not really happy with this lineup here.
So
You're gonna end up doing the same thing.
So no, what you will start to see being new here is that we do something and we six feel really good about it, and it goes to the floor, and people start emailing and saying, what'd you do to my town? What'd you do to my town? What'd you do to my town? And how are we going to answer those questions?
You know, we've been in the maps the way they're set up here, but we haven't taken apart any existing district. We've just enlarged and put some districts together. And I'm not sure it's as complicated as you think it is. I do think that we need to get in a lot of testimony and take in a lot of testimony about where the appropriate lines are. And I've had some people come up to me, Senator Owen, saying, "You've got I love it. I love what you did in my area." And so I'm not saying, like I said yesterday, I'm not for a second suggesting this is right, but I don't think it's that complicated for us to go through a process here and try to figure out the districts. And I actually believe it's our job
Just this committee.
with a lot of input, just like with any other stuff we do. Yeah.
I think the second you get into questions about wards and
No, that's
anything
different.
else,
Wards are different. Wards out from that.
well, when are we gonna get to those?
That's the wards actually will be done. My guess is over the summer and fall or next year. The wards follow the district pattern. There's ways in which the wards are simpler. There's also ways in which they're more
Mhm.
complicated, because that's where you get into all the issues that you're
Mhm.
thinking about with reapportionment.
Right,
You get to those with wards,
yeah.
not so much with the district.
I guess I feel like we're being made into a redistricting committee, because I don't see how we spend time on other things. And then we have to convince our colleagues that this is the right map.
Local, thus we have them in.
Help them convince us.
Our Senate
Otherwise,
colleagues,
Yeah.
there's a whole nother chamber that needs to approve that.
Once we get it, something that at least the six of us agree on, then we send it over to the House and let them peck at it as well. Okay. But what I've seen so far being such a little time here, that if once somebody starts to make a decision, says, okay, here you go. Draw on it if you want, but if it isn't, we'll get the consensus.
Yes.
So what I heard from a House Education Committee member was, when we drew up this map, thank you. At least you did something. And that's what I'm saying is that we don't have to make everything perfect right now. We just need to establish the parameters we're gonna work in. And the details will get worked out later, but there's 3 words in any time a new group gets together, like we've never worked together. It's first you form, then you storm, and then we come down to a norm. We all understand what we gotta do and we all work together to do it. So, and I understand the political ramifications of this. Not everybody's gonna be happy with what we decide. And so it's gonna have political ramifications. We can't stop that.
People want to have input on the maps we create. And that's just for elections that frankly, they don't care that much about, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, it doesn't really materially change their life if they're one legislator or another. It changes a lot more for them what school district they're in. And I just think we're underestimating the level of buy-in that we should be getting to feel good about these maps. I feel really strongly about that.
So, and I'll say the other thing, I said it before you came in, is that we got 52 supervisory unions, we got 52 superintendents who have been in charge. They've been in charge through COVID. I'm not quite sure what their role is going to be in this. As far as when it's all sugared off, are we going to end up with these guys as 52 of them are going to be the 9 district heads, whatever we're going to call them. And as long as they think they have a say, and they should have a say to a certain extent, because they have the institutional knowledge of what works in that supervisory union. But we can't please everybody. We're going to have to come up with how we're going to operate as a committee.
Just wanted to go back about 10 minutes to something Senator Hashim said, which I don't think we ever really answered his question. That was the expectation that the Commission on the Future of Vermont's Education should have, were expected to maybe address this whole scenario of where we are with our, high per cost, per student cost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wanted to agree with them that that was really an expectation of mine. I thought this commission would be a fantastic mechanism, but the speed that they're moving is not maybe appropriate for the speed that we need to, as a legislature, react to the problem. That's my fundamental observation of that group.
If I can add, I think it would be helpful to bring them in and say, where are you at the process?
Well,
And, I mean, because I read some of the minutes, but, not at a lot of live meetings, but I think it would be helpful for them to come in and say, hey, here's where we're at. What are some of the things that you've done? What do you hope to accomplish? And also, how can you assist us in this process? Because now it kind of feels like we're close to spinning our wheels. And I think we should have them in soon.
and that's normal,
Spinning our wheels.
the process. Yeah. We're just starting over this thing.
So I agree with you. I did watch them because my inclination was to remain affiliated with this committee this term if the elections went well. So I did watch them, and I do think we need to have them come in and talk about where they are from their perspective and what's ahead for the next year or what have you.
Yeah. Or do they need more direction from us? Like, are they waiting for us to say, hey, we need help figuring this out? And then, they get to it and said where
That's a
they're
good
at.
point. It's a whole other tool in the toolbox.
Yeah. I think we should utilize them.
Did you look at the SU's timeline and all that? Have you even perused that at all?
What they, no, I haven't seen what they have, I haven't seen what they've done.
Really not too far off from what we've been discussing right here. Really isn't.
Where's that thing?
And he sent to us. A little bit.
Zero out.
No.
Not as crazy as we are.
Well, that's the point. So, because I see you do it every day.
What?
You arrive with a plan that you've developed, you pass it around, and then everybody chisels away at it, okay? If you have, if the paper is truly just blank, well, then there's a real problem. But at least if, the chairman has, map 2 with 9 districts. AOE has map 1 with 5 districts. There's going to be a whole series of sequence of these things, but to the point of, if we find that the Vermont Superintendent's Association is, we're not that far apart, let's see if we can find common ground and then keep moving.
Well, that's my hope in the process. And in this area, their proposal is to set parameters and figure out what the process should be to draw the map. I'm just saying, I'm not on GovOps. I signed up to do education policy. And I think the people around this table are underestimating how long it will take to get the electoral and district boundary part right of this. And that will take away from a lot of other work that I hope we do. I don't know. Are you saying us devoting 1 day a week to this? And then going back, I don't know the container for this conversation.
Well, we have in this committee not taken up bills that we would otherwise take up because we're doing this.
I think I thought we were going to get to other bills too.
We might have some time, but so
When does this stop becoming a pursuit of educational excellence and quality and become a conversation about the maps that make sense?
well, you missed
for
the
our
first
area?
part of our discussion. We spent some time at the beginning talking about what are our goals and what are the big educational opportunity was at the top.
Yes, but how does that relate to this map?
Well, I think it relates, the way that we've talked about it anyway, is the notion that whether we do individually or not, and I accept the secretary's proposition that having larger districts, and then we went to a discussion about what does large mean, what's the range we're thinking about, and what are the opportunities that come with larger districts. And, you know, we talked about the deep ability to build a deeper bench, the ability to have specialized services. If you've got kids in the right schools, right size for them, et cetera, that's a better educational opportunity. And all of that relates to districts.
So I'm sorry, I missed that. What range of size of student population?
We are sort of in our mind holding open a range of something like 4 to 12. I think you were as high as 12, right? 4 to 10,000, 4 to 11,
4 to
11,000. Yeah. And we haven't yet, we left that range open.
4 to what?
And
4 to 12, did you think?
well, I think one senator went as high as 12.
You went to 50.
No, okay. Well, we heard the testimony from the Beavers about the minimums. Everybody's saying everybody we've heard from so far, would certainly, I think, said 4 is the kind of minimum. And then, you know, then where we are from that. We had testimony to the effect that it could be as, you know, one person testified, one expert we heard from, 12 to 15 is the optimal size. We heard, I think the Bees would have suggested something smaller with their expert with a minimum of 4. So, and then we have to figure out how that concept of, let's just say 4 to 10 actually meets the ground in Vermont, because we have mountains down the middle. You know, we have travel patterns, we have historic settlement patterns, and we have those things to account for. And so, at least for my part, as I took the first stab at this, I took the secretary's 5 with those thoughts in mind, created 9. And now, as we take some testimony, we think about whether that's the right number or whether they should be or how. And
I highly recommend reading what the superintendents put out, because another thing they say is don't expect anything, not excellence, I'm more dramatic in my language. Don't expect huge change of any kind if there's no school construction money. So, I mean, I'm thinking of Chittenden County. You could put 2 districts together and get, you know, we almost have the only one that's at 4,000. So you put 2 districts together, you're there. They don't have any extra buildings that they're shedding. So they're all at capacity. So, you know, I don't want to give people the false impression that we gained something just by changing the size of the district in every part of the state.
I think that's right. And I think everybody knows that we have to figure out school construction, and that's got to be part of this before we're done. But we're also trying to not just make it all one big ball and therefore be able to get nothing done. Trying to work down sequentially. We recognize we have a lot of things to think about as we go through it. But if we don't try to think about it sequentially, then it's just one big ball that's constant chaos, and we can't get anything figured out. So
I guess let me correct myself if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing you saying is that we will be successful if all we get done this session is the district map.
I will say, I said this yesterday, that in my mind, and we have to figure out, when I use the word framework, I'm not quite sure what that means yet, but we can get the framework for developed for governance. It will create the possibility for a lot more work to continue from the summer and fall.
And the framework is a map and how they will live within that map governance wise.
Yeah, the words can be figured out later. And that's going to take, that has a lot of the complication for, you know, that can happen over the summer and fall if we have just found second. Beyond. And you know, board size. And you know, we were getting close to, what I think is another key discussion for us to have is, you know, do we want to be prescriptive or not about things like school size and class size? And that's another big major discussion for us.
And if we are or not, if we are, how do we incentivize? How do we prompt districts to consider and incentivize to be part of it. So I'm going to go back just 1 minute to Senator Romney said. Without school construction. So first off, I'm a huge advocate of school construction, state sponsored. We have facilities, in our district and otherwise that it's a high school and a middle school together next door to another high school and a middle school. And, some things could be as easy as the high schools come together and the middle schools come together.
Mhm,
That allows for, better academic programs.
mhm.
I mean, it's not
Yeah.
all about construction. It's about considering what the right sizing of the school size.
Right.
Okay, but I do agree with you that school construction renovation has to be part of this conversation.
Here's what I'm taking away. Okay. You can look at this map and look at your area and think, yeah, like if you move a town here or there, this person's gonna be mad, but we've been talking about this for years. You get up to the northwest part of the state, and this has nothing to do with the reality on the ground. I mean, it is not an insult to your work. It just, I think you acknowledge that. We call Grand Isle Chittenden Central. I mean, we haven't even figured out who generally goes where for school in that part of the state. The Northeast Kingdom, I'm sure they have something to say about their cross-border, needs, as well as a few towns that are in the wrong place, as well as how do we functionally have this geographically large of a school district and feel like we are able to share a governance. So if maybe people can start to say like my area is okay, but I do want to spend a lot of time talking about Chittenden County and that part of the state, because I mean, they just hired the former Secretary of Education for Delaware in the Essex Westford School District. That's their new superintendent. Like, there's a different world out there that would rather, like other parts of the state say sometimes, just be left alone. So yes, Burlington and Winooski have talked forever about, they're so geographically close. Should they have just been one school district? They're cut apart in this map. The MMU, very, very strong feelings. CBSD took them decades to create this district. Essex Junction barely talk to each other and they're the same place. I didn't say that. Sorry, Essex. But like I'm getting the sense that all of you feel like my people can get there with their area. And I truly don't know. I've been doing this a long time for Chittenden County, and I don't know what that looks like for me.
I have a statement. So, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but you came in 30 minutes after we started, and we just spent 45 minutes explaining to you where we'd already gone. So if we're gonna work on this thing, I don't wanna hear 15 reasons why we can't do something. I need to have 50 reasons why we can do it, and I think it can be done. But we all have to be of the same mindset that we're gonna get there. But right now, I'm hearing so much dissension that it's almost impossible, so why should we even bother?
Who's going to help me draw a map?
I just think what we do is we try to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. We get people in and we make adjustments as people come in and what they say makes sense. And we're gonna have some dotted lines for a while and then finally make a.
And we could grow more districts, because like just what you said, this is just the beginning of it. And you could say, hey, I've talked to my guys and we're making up 6,000 people right here and they coexist right now. It's good for them to stay. What we want our school system to know, changes are coming. Our voters have asked us to do this, to make it more affordable. It is, and what we've seen so far, unless you have, and I'm with him. You come in here, not you personally. People come in and just say, it can't be done, it can't be done, it can't be done. And we don't do anything. And there has been, I've talked with Senator Hardy and she says, we can make adjustments and help work. And it's like, yes, but nobody's taken this and said, we're going to do our best to get it where we're in less money is being spent in administration and that we all are working more together and that, hey, even though this line's here, but your student is right here on this line, you can come over to this school because it's only a 4-minute drive for him to go to school rather than going over to the school that they're supposed to go to, him, her, they. You know, so we're thinking about all that and like need to be here because yeah, sometimes and you're working on other stuff, get that too, but it's you shouldn't have to go back 45 minutes explain to catch you up and then have all your questions, which are fair to ask, fair to answer. And that's my view on this. But I am not going to be a senator that is going to say that mountain's too tall and I don't want to tackle it. Because just listening to Beth talk about the legalities and Senator Hashim knowing he knows the legalities, that's almost enough to say, but our voters asked us to do something different and I'm going to honor that. And your advice about the map, that's great. But if we don't give somebody a timeline, like, you got to do this out in a month, 2 months, so get on it. That type of thing.
I think you tried first.
Oh,
Yeah.
If I can, I want to kind of take us off from what I think we already all agree. Or kind of our common denominator is we feel probably relatively safe that a district of about 4,000 is the floor. Okay, 4,000 students dividing into the number of students we have. It's like 17 or 18 districts. So right there, we're already like dramatically lower to achieve this administrative efficiency where we are right now. So I'm not I don't approach things, I approach things more optimistically in that, okay, that's the common denominator. It's a huge benefit just from doing that alone. If we can do better than that, great. We have to have that conversation. But I kind of want to level set us without getting anybody upset. That I think that at a minimum, our common denominator is not a perfect solution, but that's a good starting point. To your point about bringing in the plan, 17 districts is far better than 52 with 119 or 52 SUs and 119 districts. It's huge. That's just just kind of level set everybody, kind of tamp down the.
So I just think we keep putting one foot in front of the other and try to keep moving. And best we can, and then we'll see what actually unfolds as we go through that process. So, think that losing the whole, effectively moving the whole year to having somebody else do it is I don't think we can do that. I think we need to get it done so that there's then time to do other things over the summer. And that's all. And I think we're going to have but anyway, let's just keep putting one foot in front of the other. We'll see how it goes. So.
I think I am trying to offer lots of options for how we set ourselves up to succeed. Saying that we are just going to bring people into Senate education and draw this map does not feel like a path to success to me.
So Gardner doesn't feel that complicated. It was.
So
Anyway,
that's an option. We had somebody that we could say, this is what you do. You come in and tell us how to form these districts, but we don't. Unless you know something I don't. I mean, we got the latest census that they used to redistrict the political.
Yeah.
But that's not the same.
Well, in Senator Romhan's defense, so we could create a body of justice out there. That's one of our tools. We could create a committee, some committee. We could do that.
But we can also create a committee right now that is working in parallel during session on the maps. That's what I'm saying. That's what the redistricting process is. You take the right members of the legislature who have the ears and the knowledge in all parts of the state, and they're cross chamber, and in fact, they're not cross chamber because the House does their own map and the Senate does their own map, but you're trying to get both chambers to agree on one map. And we're gonna work on something, and then
So you're
What?
gonna form a subcommittee
what?
from other legislatures? Is that-
It's not a subcommittee,
Okay.
it's a special committee that's often created in the legislature for redistricting.
Let's, Senator Upshain first.
I think, I mean, there was a mention earlier about, earlier in the year, constituents sending us up here to make changes to the education system because property taxes are way too high. And I hear that. But what I'm wondering is if we are perhaps losing sight of what we hope to accomplish with this, because, I mean, let's say we eliminate the 2 or 3 dozen superintendent positions. And I mean, how much money is that going to save in this restructuring? Because I heard from constituents, yes, lower property taxes and make education better, which yes is very general. But I haven't heard specifically, that the folks in Brattleboro necessarily want to merge with the folks up in Springfield in one district. But if we are doing that, then I just want to know that the savings that may or may not, that may exist, I want to know how substantial they are. And if they're not particularly substantial, I don't know that the significant amount of heartache and challenge that I agree that we're going to face, I don't know if that's the right approach. I do see there being value in resource sharing with the larger districts. And, I think that's great. But there's certainly going to be a lot of pushback in terms of local control or the loss of local control. But, I guess to distill this down to one statement is, will the potential savings of creating 9 districts, will that be worth all of this work? That's the rhetorical question I'm putting up.
If we take 52 supervisory unions and, let's say a superintendent makes 150 grand, that's $7,800,000. And that's not including the business managers.
That's all the superintendents.
Correct. So, I mean, the money. Go ahead.
No, I think the chair.
No,
I was gonna say that, so, whether you take a 5-district state or a 9-district state or a 7, what, it doesn't matter. One of the next exercises, Senator Hashim's point, is you take the labor spreadsheet and you run all the numbers. And what's missing still on the labor spreadsheet is what are those elements between the district headquarters and the school? Because they're not all going away. Right. We know that, right? So, because there's work to be done, but what can go away and what benefit does it derive financially? And if it doesn't derive the answers you're looking for, to then use those funds to help other, with education quality or infrastructure or what have you, then, then we don't change anything. But until we can prove that to ourselves, it's a bit of a mute point. But the starting point is at least create a couple of assumptions. One assumption is there's X number of districts, and then the labor roll up with cost to see if it nets the benefit you're looking for. If it doesn't, you don't go. It's a basic business decision.
I think there's other factors.
There are many factors, but
For instance, the one you were talking about, having a district big enough to be able to, say, you know, this building we can use for this purpose, middle school, this one for elementary, this one, opportunities you don't get with little districts. So there's a range of benefits that come from potential benefits. And somebody yesterday was talking about, well, one person said we should put the CTEs on here, put those dots on it, and we should probably have another map with, actually, we saw it yesterday, all the schools on it. And then, so
Is someone going to be helping us with maps daily?
well, we actually, whoever showed it, was it you who showed it to us?
Yes, Beth
Yeah.
St. James, Office of
Yeah.
Legislative
Yeah.
Council. I did not create that.
No, no, you didn't. create it.
Right.
Yeah.
Using
But there's a lot
yeah,
of shared,
I sent you a link.
Yeah.
Right.
I have it.
So
And the CT. is really-
just like any bill, we need to be able to have access to someone who is going to impartially help us draw our own line and propose it. That's a must in this process.
for so it's a little simpler when we're working with the 252 towns because it's not too hard to just move down.
I don't think you guys want to sit here watching me zoom in on Chittenden County and the islands for 2 days. Do you?
We're not there yet.
Well,
But we need a process.
So we. can
This
talk
is,
about
the,
go ahead.
I don't know,
Yeah.
this is, someone has to have some redistricting expertise who's gonna stay with us every day. Someone has to be able to draw maps. We can't get this right, sitting here looking at an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with a state of Vermont map on it.
Well, it's enough to get some testimony to start with.
I can't even see, I mean, I'd have to go look through the town.
We can get something. Actually, we talked to Will this up.
I think we can a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, like, we need to be resourced to do this. I need a blown up map of Chittenden County with the ADM numbers in each town with the schools layer on top of that. That is how we do maps properly.
Didn't we ask AOE for that like a month ago?
We have same more a month ago.
Cause I just remembered.
So,
Yes.
okay. That's a,
I mean, true, and I was this, loud or whatever about this when we were doing our housing bill. We need to know where water sewer infrastructure is. We need, what are we? This map can't be what we look at for the next month. And we need someone who's paid to be our expert to help us develop more maps. Is your son going to do all that? Like, I'm very confused. Okay.
so we need the ability to manipulate maps.
Daily.
Perhaps the commission on the future of education. Yeah.
That's a good thought. I think we need to bring him in here and have them tell us, but
Didn't they do a report already? What they record for a report?
So, we have one here, I don't know if we want to talk about this today or not, the notion of optimal school size and optimal class size, and whether we want to be prescriptive or whether we don't want to be prescriptive. And I've got to pick up a sense from a number of people about that question.
Just reiterate my thoughts on it. Because none of us respectfully have the expertise or the training that professional educators have. I am very hesitant to say I know that a school or that a classroom should have a ratio of 1 to 10 or a ratio of 1 to 20 because I don't know what a good class size is Burlington compared to Guilford compared to somewhere in the Northeast Kingdom. And so that, I feel like that is something that should be left to the experts. And I feel like we can have a somewhat more of a heavier touch on the school size, but class size, in my opinion, needs to be left with the teachers.
Just for the Vermont Association of, or Superintendent's Association, kindergarten's 12, grades 1 through 5, 15, grades 6 through 12, 18.
So we've already done it.
So they recommended, you know, and it's pretty close to what, you know, we may say, well, a couple more students in there, because I've talked to some teachers that said, at least we have it, and we're gonna get conflict on this. It's like, well, I don't quite agree with that. That's where us as legislators, as Beth is told, we're gonna be the ones writing the law. So as much as you want to get, there's always gonna be somebody saying. you didn't
But
get it right.
I also think there should be, if we have to pick a number, that's fine, but I also think there needs to be flexibility for influx of population. I mean, I think, in my own opinion, I think our population is going to change significantly over 5 years, 10 years. And yeah, I get it's easy to come back during session and just change the numbers, but rather than having to revisit it every year or every other year, provide some general guidelines based on, what experts say, but also providing for some flexibility if things change abruptly. So might make sense.
It's good.
So we're talking about school size. I see we have at least 3 different options on school size. One, we create optimal windows as they're outlined apparently in the Vermont Superintendent's Association.
Class size.
We dictate optimal windows size, and then we incentivize. Okay, that's one approach. The other approach is we simply leave it to the districts and allow them to use their funds as they see fit to, in relation to how it affects schools, so they can keep everything the way it is. And they still have the same foundation fund, but they have all these, facilities scattered about, some closer, some further. But just leave it up to them, because, they're the ones who are on the hook for improving the education quality. Or we do absolutely nothing at all. We don't even comment. Anyway, I suppose it's 3 very distinct options. And I'm sure there's options in those extremes.
So the optimum, the Superintendent's Association has picked the proper class sizes depending on grade, but a lot of that is there are disparities in that because some school districts don't have enough teachers and they don't have enough paraeducators. They're not, so they're feeling the crunch, just like they do with a budget. Because they have to operate within their own means. So those numbers may be conflated.
Well, they also highlight in their report that it would be unwise in that context to set teacher ratios per student because they can't guarantee a teacher ratio.
See, I haven't had a chance to read it, so I don't know what it says.
Yeah.
So-
I thought it was really useful because they're
Yeah.
educational experts.
Right.
And if you ask me if people are going to disagree what I want to accomplish, it's what's best for kids. We haven't even talked about the assumption that consolidating districts can cost more, which is an extremely, that is what superintendents and others who came in were cautioning us against, is that you can create diseconomies of scale after a certain point.
Remember that.
I remember. And so when we look at, let's do something because the people have asked us to do something, we have to make sure that we know where our compass is headed and that we are not creating more expense and less value for students. And that's why I think the superintendents who've had these conversations for years are a good starting point if we don't have a natural compass that's based on what we know is best for a student.
Yeah, or we go to I'm kind of, frankly, I think they get the block grant and I'm not in favor of being prescriptive. So it's the same thing.
Well, I think I told you, I have a different perspective that it would make sense to have a foundation formula that follows the student as close as possible to the classroom and to the school, and that you need a different funding mechanism and funding source for school construction that is where voters can have a say, and it's a finite amount of money that districts have to decide how they're going to spend wisely and with voter input.
And I said during the presentation by the AOE, I said that as we keep coming up with cost savings or, refine the process, I hope you're putting money aside for school construction. Because the population, I agree with Senator Machine that it's going to change.
So have
Yeah.
you seen something I haven't that they
Yeah.
answered that question?
Yeah.
They haven't answered, they answered you, the Agency of Education.
Yeah, they wrote it down. That was an answer because they hadn't bothered it evidently.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
they're, if we're gonna have cost savings, we're gonna improve the process, then we need to put some money aside for school construction, because we still have a moratorium. And we got the PCB problem. I think if we don't do anything else today, we should leave here all in agreement that, we're all committed to the process. Number one, it's not gonna be the one that can yell the loudest or has the most students in their district. I personally am here because I asked to be put on the education committee, even knowing how difficult this process is going to be. So I'm committed to it. And as we learn to work together and, identify each other's strengths and weaknesses, we're going to pull together and we're going to get this fixed. We have to.
I feel like me saying I'm not a map maker is being taken as
No.
like, I don't
no.
be on this.
I'm not a
committee.
map maker.
I am not a map maker.
No.
So I need a map maker if we're making maps.
But we're not at that stage yet. We're
What
not ready.
stage are we at?
We're still at defining what's the process, what's the parameters are we gonna start working with? But at the, Senator Weeks' point, that can happen, it's gonna change. But as far as the district size and everything.
I guess can we I'm sorry I missed the values and goals conversation. Equity, career readiness, I had things I thought were missing from that list. But I think we all have to really take seriously the gravity of what it means to our communities to draw these boundary lines. We have not talked to teachers yet. We have not talked to students yet. I don't think we talked to parents. So I don't know how we'd be on the same page, I guess. I mean, you heard from my community where my kids are going to go to school that they have had really hard conversations about educational quality, that they took, communities that don't feel like they're perfectly simpatico and made a unified school district, and that took a lot of cultural shift and work and change. And I'm worried that we're really disconnected as 6 people sitting around this table from everyone else's reality who wants to be part of this conversation.
Well, why don't we call it a day? It's, and tomorrow we have
we have the redistricting, with Tim Deslin.
that relates to this, putting that one is for a different reason, putting the cart moving out like a little bit ahead of the course, because that's going to be more about wards and districts. That's the issue he's talking about is wards, because the districts we're drawing don't have to worry about population and representation of the wards do. But anyway, that it's something we're going to have to cross as we put this together. So we have them in, then we have Beth in, talking about the three models of CTE governance that we have right now. The CTE is one of the things that's somewhere along the line we're gonna have to, the governance structure for CTEs and how that's gonna fit into this is something we're gonna have to think through. And was that it?
Yes.
So we have the superintendent?
Yeah. What we got tomorrow, I don't know. How much time do we have? What do we have?
So tomorrow that is where if everything goes according to plan, we're done at about 3:30. And then Friday is open.
And who, yeah, we could have the, of course, Beth, we could move. Okay. That
And I actually have a bill on the floor tomorrow, so that,
wouldn't bother you.
well, I'm just saying.
What time we have? Who was first tomorrow?
Tim Devlin.
Yeah.
At 1:30.
1:30. So we could, if we could get the superintendent's association, we could get them in, at 2:30 or 3 or so and try, so we can get, a shot at that, take a shot at that.
To brief their.
Yeah, brief there, yeah, which way,
The
something.
good news is the recommendations are great.
They're reading through it, they're pretty,
Yeah, yeah.
and even their
Well, your
timelines.
homework
are
tonight.
better.
Your homework.
It's just about
Okay,
26.
Okay, that's, they
So-
just get down to stars.
everybody good for
They
today?
did start something.
Is someone from the Agency of Education here?
No, they're.
Are they, okay, oh, yeah, maybe not. Are they going to sit in here and be working with us?
Yeah, I asked the question, they said yes. They're gonna be involved in the process, but we have to ask them when we want them to be there.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
That's
All right,
probably would have.
tomorrow at 1:30.